Good morning, everyone. Can everyone hear me all right? Okay, fantastic. I'm here to present on ocean plastics. We also will be having another discussion on, I believe the next one is it upcycling or is the next one composting?
Upcycling is next.
Upcycling is next, and then that's our April series, and our May is on composting. So that's going to be options for composting around maybe doing pickup, drop-offs, and we're even going to get into tips for composting in backyards if you're doing your own at-home composting as well, and how to properly maintain that. A lot of people get stink problems with it, so how we can defend that as well and try to combat stink in the backyard and animals and stuff like that. So that's coming up in May. But today I'm here to speak about ocean plastics. This is a presentation that I have worked on with Dr. Kara Lavender-Law from the Sea Education Institute. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that on the next page here. But basically, what are they and how are they affecting our coast in Maine? And what can we do to minimize plastic pollution? I work for EcoMaine. We provide waste services to Cumberland, North Yarmouth, and about 1/3 of Maine's waste by volume. So this is not just trash, but also recycling. And we also facilitate a organics program with a company called AgriCycle Energy as well. So that's where I come from. We're very interested in promoting the waste hierarchy, so our DEP waste hierarchy, starting with reduce, reuse, and then recycle, compost. And really, lastly, materials going to waste to energy and then landfill. But this is an incredibly important topic. It's affecting everyone here in this room, especially even more so because I'm sure all of us love the ocean that we're nearby and our home, and we love to recreate here. So jumping into things, big thanks to Dr. Kara Lavender-Law. So she's from the Sea Education Association. She's a research professor of oceanography. And yeah, she's helped dramatically. I'm going to be referencing a lot of her work. She's a lifetime marine scientist who has done some pretty incredible work on ocean plastics, actually going into what we refer as the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, Atlantic Garbage Patch, and doing ocean plastics research actually in the ocean right there. So I guess we're going to jump right in. So ocean plastics has been it's an effect of the rapid rise in plastic production in general. Right here, this is actually a graph of the plastic production since 1950. So you can see we had the Industrial Revolution, the invention of plastics, and all of a sudden it just explodes. So plastic production, you can see, has also increased at the same rate as our plastic waste generation. So that's a huge thing, is a lot of these plastic items are not meant to last. A lot of them are single use, right? A lot of packaging is plastic. A lot of things there are some things that are getting used more than, and not just thrown away. I mean, the chairs in this room, rugs, things like that. There's a lot of plastic around us that we're using, but there's a lot of it that's becoming waste as well. About 8.3 billion metric tons of plastic have been produced, and of this, 70% have become waste. And plastic is one of those things that is not going to be disappearing. About 90% of all of this plastic that's been produced is actually still in existence to this day. Plastic is very hard to get rid of. If it goes into a landfill, it's just going to break down into smaller microplastics. It's never truly going to go away. So there's a huge problem here. Has anyone here heard of the garbage patch, the Great Pacific Garbage Patch? Yeah, I see a lot of heads. All right, so the garbage patch. We've all seen photos of this big patch of floating trash, plastics, all sorts of different things. This is not just a garbage patch in the Pacific, but there's also one in the Atlantic. It's actually the gyres in the ocean where the currents bring those materials. Something interesting that Dr. Law has done is actually had one of her close friends take a photo of this. She's a NASA astronaut, and this is from the space station. So they actually took a photo of the Pacific garbage patch from space. And as you can see, it doesn't necessarily, you can't see it from space. It's not something that's so visible that it's seen from outer space. And it's not just, a floating continent or anything. So that's something that some people get a little confused about, but pretty interesting that she sent someone all the way up. This is also here, this is a picture from the garbage patch on a sailboat. So the Sea Education Association, they're out of the Woods Hole Institute. They basically will take this big boat of research fellows out for a sailing expedition, and they go out into the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, Atlantic Garbage Patch, and then we'll do their own individual research projects while they're out on the ship. This is from one of the endeavors that Dr. Law had taken, a view of the actual garbage patch. Why we're not seeing all of those big things, maybe ask. There we go, the chimes. That's because a lot of it is actually microplastics. So the concentration in these areas are so dense of those microplastics, but we can't necessarily see them. So those photos that we see of the Pacific garbage patch, a lot of those are actually off the coast of areas with lack of waste management structure and not necessarily the garbage patch itself. So these areas, although have high concentrations, and they do have macroplastics, so you can see we've got what looks like a beam boot here, honestly. This is a bunch of those large-scale plastics. These are all found in that garbage patch. So they are there, these big macroplastics. But in contrary to popular belief, they're not all necessarily in these big floating islands. They're all distributed across the ocean. And the big thing is that a lot of them have broken down into these really tiny plastic particles, which a lot of the research has been surrounding. It's these really small plastics. So we're going to get into microplastics in a second here. But just interesting to understand, we've got a bucket here, a lot of plastic films, probably from production. Another huge makeup that we have is fishing gear. So commercial fishing gear. In the far corner, you can't quite see it, but there's actually a tire that has made it. So a lot of these, they will break down. When they break down, they turn into what we call microplastics. These are not visible necessarily to the naked eye. Right here is actually one of the nets that they will drag behind the sailboat to collect those plastic particles. And then they take those drags. This is actually the same kind of net that they would use for shrimp or small sea creatures as well. And these plastics get caught in the net, and then they're able to identify those. So this is what a lot of these plastics look like. So this was from one of those nets. You can see as they've dragged those and emptied it out, a lot, it's just high density of these tiny little microplastic particles. Some of them are even too small. They probably never even made it through that. They were so small that they made it through that net as well. So these ones are even the larger microplastics, for that matter, that were able to get caught in the net. So what are microplastics? Okay, this photo's not working, but size-wise, here, 1 second. The size identifies them. This is kind of a necessary photo, so I'm gonna try to get it. Well, anyway. Very small size. The shape will identify them. They can be all sorts of different shapes. You can see in this photo here that they're actually strands. So those would be like textile plastics. So those could be anything that came out of a laundry machine. So if we wash our plastic fleeces and stuff like that, that can all go into runoff, get into the ocean. These microplastics will look like those little threads. They can be pellets. They can be broken off buoys, foam, different types of materials, because polymer type is also something. So different types of plastics exist from 1 all the way to 7. These are the plastics that we're able to accept at EcoMaine. That's going to be anywhere from PET, HDPE, so PET would be things like soda bottles and water bottles. HDPE are harder, more rigid plastics, vinyl, low-density polyethylene, which are things like those plastic bags that we were just looking at that they were pulling out of the water. Those will break down generally faster into these microplastics than some of the more rigid plastic materials. They all have different chemical additives. There are so many plastics out there. It's far beyond these 7 types. There's many, many different polymers. But when they're exposed to the environment, that's when they start to break down. They can break down in the sunlight. They can break down in the exposure from waves and sand and rocks, but they will break down over time. All right. So right here is that concentration of the microplastics floating in the North Atlantic Ocean. So as we can see, right here is that garbage patch, right? We see those super high concentrations of plastics in this area. Right here, you can see the red dots are all showing those high concentrations. The blue, not so much. Luckily, up here on the Maine coast, we are seeing a lot less concentration in microplastics. But the reason for this is because there's a lot of ocean currents that are actually channeling all of this plastic into this area. And that's why we're seeing this garbage patch, so to speak. So this is that Atlantic garbage patch. This is another visual here of that concentration. Down here, a lot less off the coast of South America and in North America, but really off the coast of the United States is pretty high concentration. So when we zoom up into the Portland area, this is another study that Dr. Law actually did. This is on the big plastic pollution in Maine. So these are photos that were taken right on the Maine coast. You can see lots of plastics left along the side. This looks like someone had some kind of fun partying and just left it all behind, didn't want to deal with the cleanup for it. We see this a lot. I'm gonna kind of talk a little bit about what the waste categories are. So this is, plastic waste collected in coastal and remote island shoreline cleanups in Maine between 2011 and 2020. So this had found that foam fragments were the biggest one. That's largely from buoys and fishing supplies. Plastic fragments made up another large percentage. That was about 16%, so plastics that had broken down. And then plastic foodware is number 3 at almost the same amount, about 16%. So plastic foodware is getting left, whether it's coming off of boats, whether it's being left on the beaches. Plastic foodware is a huge concern. Another thing is the plastic bottles. Boats and beachgoers leaving their materials behind. Maybe things are coming out through riverways, getting left on rivers, near waterways, and getting swept into the ocean. That's another way they can be reaching the shore. So plastic drinkware bottles, foam foodware, which is shocking because foam foodware is actually it was banned in Maine. So it's been banned in Maine. However, we're still seeing a lot of these foodware containers in our oceans. Food wrappers, things that are blowing away. Plastic bags are another one. Also, that's one that's been banned in the state of Maine. So just interesting. Strapping and bands and zip ties, those are big for Maine aquaculture. You think about lobster band ties. Those are getting in. So this is all just fishermen supplies, things like that. So we're seeing a lot of plastic, and it's kind of diverse, the amount of materials that we're seeing across the state. But specific to our fishing-related debris, this is what the breakdown looks like. We have a lot of rope that we're seeing. So about 46% of the debris in Maine is actually that's related to fishing is actually ropes. The buoys are problematic. Those are about 19.7%. A lot of the time, these buoys get run over by fishing boats. Propeller can cut them off. They run loose. And then you have these foam plastics that are that are loose in the water. Lobster claw bands, bait containers, fishing nets, and lures and light sticks are also contributors of what were found. Here I'm sure everyone gone to the beach, seen stuff like this before? Yeah, it's pretty dramatic. I know after last winter's storms, if anyone else had gone, I know I went out for a walk on the beach, and it was unbelievable the amount of plastic and litter that had been washed up onto the shores. Not to mention, there's a lot of effects of these winter storms and these storms are becoming ever more prevalent. So the more we're seeing climate change affecting our state, we are getting these strong winter storms, and these winter storms can contribute to the plastics and everything in our water. So we have the fish shacks falling in over at Willard Beach here. This is some of the damage in the mid-coast area, full working waterfronts. We talked about all of that fishing gear that ended up in the water. This was, I'm sure, not great for that. We're probably seeing higher numbers. This is Pemaquid Point Lighthouse. That got knocked in. So these strong damaging storms are really contributing as well to problems. Not the same amount as just people not being responsible for litter and illegal dumping and stuff, but it is something to note that it's kind of cyclical in that matter. Ocean plastics are a huge problem, not just visually, right? We don't want to see trash on our beaches. It's not in the right spot, but they're also affecting wildlife. So right here we've got a seal fishing net trapped around its neck. Plastic being pulled out of this turtle's nose. There are seabirds that have been dying and their stomachs are completely filled with plastics. I've seen whales washing up. Once again, plastics in their stomachs. Not only that, but plastics have been found in human blood, which is pretty insane, that they're these teeny little microplastic particles. You think of how many times that we're potentially consuming those microplastics. Anytime we drink out of a plastic water bottle, anytime a plastic cup, plastic straws, all of that. So some plastics, once again, are more durable than others, but we're exposing ourselves to these plastics. Not only are we doing that, we're wearing them, right? Almost probably everyone in this room has some type of plastic that we're wearing on our body. We put plastic in our mouth every morning when we brush our teeth with those plastic brushes, right? So there's so many times that we're exposing ourselves to these plastics that, of course, these are getting into our bodies, into our bloodstreams. They've actually found that babies that are newborn babies are coming out with microplastics in their bodies because they've been exposed to them. So plastics are very problematic. Right here, this is a little bit more familiar, right? Garbage dumping. This is probably those types of photos that when we think ocean plastic, we think just big dumps of these plastics and just trash in general. These will often get swept offshore and look like those big islands of plastic. There are companies that are going out and trying to clean these things up, but when you do that, you're just cleaning up those big portions. What about all of these microplastics that are in high concentrations, you know? So according to the UN, approximately 400 million tons of plastic waste are produced annually, and there's lack of formal waste management structure in a lot of places in the world right now. You know, we think about what we have accessible to us. We have trash and recycling that we can just put out at the end of our driveway. For many places on the planet, things are just getting dumped. Go to the local place, get it out of sight, out of mind. Some places it gets dumped right into rivers. That carries downstream into our oceans. So littering and dumping is incredibly problematic. Not having a proper waste management structure in place, so proper disposal. And not saying that even proper disposal, you can still have contaminants that come out of proper disposal. Think of landfills, any kind of plastics blowing out of landfills, potentially getting into surrounding watersheds, going downstream, being problematic for surrounding environment. And storm damage is also a contributor to plastic waste. But the real problem is that plastics are being produced at an absurd rate, right? We're seeing incredible amounts of plastic, expectations for plastic. Plastic's clean, it keeps things safer, right? For all of us experienced COVID-19 here, and the amount of single-use plastic that boomed during that time because you could just throw it away and it was cleaner, right? Rather than washing something. So there's this concept as well that's pushed into our heads. So there's a lot of problems with packaging and single-use plastic. So what really happens to your trash? You know, in some places, materials are getting dumped. Here, thankfully, we do have a pretty good waste management structure, starting with what I referred to earlier as the solid waste hierarchy with reduce, reuse, recycle, composting, and digestion. Digestion would be breaking down materials anaerobically this would be organic material anaerobically without the presence of oxygen, capturing methane. Compost would be taking the food waste and turning it into soil. Waste to energy is one step above the landfill. However, at that point, we're dealing with trash. It's all bad. It's all taking up space, right? You know, waste to energy produces electricity. However, there's still trash. It still goes to a landfill at some point. So making sure that we're reducing and refusing single-waste plastics is going to be the biggest takeaway. So just seeking alternatives to these single-use plastics. Maybe that's switching over to only using your reusable water bottle. Even when you purchase a reusable water bottle, it's very challenging, but finding a reusable water bottle that's not plastic, right? This plastic is often in the lid, straws, things like that. So that's another thing. Focusing on reducing your own impact. Reuse what we already have. So not going out and buying something new. This could even look like going and buying secondhand instead of purchasing new materials or plastic materials. Recycling materials, so plastics that are already in existence, keeping those in the recycling stream so they can be reused, right? Rather than the alternative where they're going to continue to make virgin plastic materials. So by recycling, companies are able to purchase plastic materials and reuse that plastic, whereas the alternative would be just making brand new plastic because the demand is still there for plastics. So step one is reduce the demand for it, even if it's just our own selves. Second would be to make sure that there's a supply of already created plastics instead of new ones needing to be made. And then making sure our plastics are disposed of properly. That is the biggest one, making sure that recycling goes to recycling, trash goes to trash, plastics don't fly out the window, trash cans are emptied, so we're not putting things out that could potentially blow out into our surrounding environment. So refuse, reduce, and reuse. Reusable and refillable containers are always a plus. I like this photo here too. We do an upcycle competition with EcoMaine. This was last year's winners from Baxter Academy. They actually took all ocean plastics that they were able to find at surrounding beaches and turned it into this really cool jellyfish design here, but all made out of plastics that they were able to find on the beaches. So this was local high school students. Buying local, avoiding plastics in general, and this includes PLA, which PLA is compostable materials, because those compostable plastics, although they break down faster, they're still problematic. PLAs can be problems for recycling facilities. That can be you're still providing the amount of material. Like that's still going to go to a waste source, often to a landfill, because currently in our state we do not really have any proper management for these plastic containers, these plastic biodegradable containers. If they go to anaerobic digestion, they'll act as plastics and get depackaged and then sent back as waste. So a lot of places will send them to digestion, so that doesn't, and even if they accept it, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be used for in their slurry that they use for digestion. I believe garbage to garden can take some, but the capacity that we're pumping them out is not compatible with this one facility that's doing all of the industrial composting right now. So it's a better shift, PLAs, than from plastic because they do break down. However, we really should be focusing on reuse when it comes to this and bringing containers to places and not taking those ones that they have for takeaway. Upcycling and sharing is another way that we can reduce the amount of plastics that could end up in our oceans. So that right there, we've got this art project. They still have this, I believe, in their school. Sharing, donating. There's a lot of people in need in our state, in our world right now, and making sure that we're providing those resources to them, and buying less and buying secondhand. These are
What is upcycling again?
Upcycling would be taking something that otherwise would have been thrown away. So any kind of trash, in this case, they were using ocean plastics that they picked up and putting them to a better source. So that could even look like we've had winners in the past years that have taken old textiles and turned them into clothing. So, using it as something new. There's all sorts of different things, just finding a new use for something that otherwise would have been thrown out. These are our facilities that currently service your area. So we actually are able to, we accept around 36,000 tons of recycling every single year at our facility. This is expected to actually increase. We are expanding our recycling facility. But still, we're creating around 185,000 tons of trash. So that's trash every year that's getting thrown out. So still, we could see these tipped significantly with a lot more going to recycling, less going to trash. But there's a lot being produced. I would love to see all of this decrease in general and people start using reuse and other options more so. And then we also partner with AgriCycle. This is their facility. We've diverted 16,000 tons of organics through that program since 2016. A lot of questions we get are, where is our plastic going and how do we know that it's actually being recycled and not actually thrown out and creating more problems with surrounding ocean plastics. These are our sources. So our PET, that's going to be soda bottles and water bottles, go to EFS Plastics. This is actually a bottle. They do bottle to bottle at they do some at EFS, but at Tab Clean Tech, they do bottle to bottle. Mohawk is another facility that will take them. These are all in the United States. So EFS has one headquarters in Canada, but they're all staying internal. HDPE, that will go to Tab. Once again, Tab Clean Tech, they work with Plastipack, so that is bottle-to-bottle recycling, so keeping it circular. But they also, sometimes those materials will end up becoming textiles, carpeting. I've got some examples up front here of things that were turned into new things from our recyclables. We've got some Trex, which is a wood composite. This right here is that soda bottles and water bottles that were turned into carpeting. So right here is carpeting, bags, things like that. That being said, these things can then, although we're recycling it, we got to think you have a plastic material. That material then could present problems with microplastics, right? So it's all kind of cyclical. We've exposed yourself to all of these plastics. So right here, this is HDPE, and this is a decking composite as well here. So these are the sources where our plastics are going. And then mixed plastics, those are the big ones that people question. So number 3 through 7, those lower grade plastics, but those will get turned into more low grade plastic products. with EFS plastics. So they all do have a source, but that being said, it would be great if we just reduce the amount that we're using plastics to begin with. That's the big thing. So there's been a lot of movement in the policy space regarding plastics in our state. We had styrofoam food containers banned in 2021. We saw such high amounts in that ocean plastic study, right? Single-use plastic bags banned in 2020. Once again, another big one that we saw in our ocean plastic study. So that's been huge, and I'm sure everyone here has seen some kind of change since those years of plastic use for styrofoam and plastic bags. Even just that simple switch to paper at grocery stores has saved a lot of plastic from entering wrongfully into the recycling stream or into our ecosystem. And then, this one's use of returnable and reusable and refillable. So the refillable and reuse space is getting more and more popularized. There's a great organization out of the greater Portland area working on reuse. It's called EcoMaine. So trying to provide these reuse programs for takeaway in the area. So instead of being handed plastic clamshells when you get your takeout, you would get some kind of reuse alternative that you could be returned to the store. So these are programs that Maine is really trying to start to get going, which is exciting. There's a lot of great leaders within the state. The Maine State EPR law, it just made it through our rulemaking process. So they've determined the rules as of December. But EPR is extended producer responsibility for packaging. So this is surrounding consumer packaging. We've had EPR in the past. EPR is things like the bottle bill. So know how we get 5 cents back for every bottle that we're returning, right? So there's basically the responsibility that's paying for the cost of the recycling and ensuring the recycling. This is the same thing with, there's one for paint as well, paint care in Maine. So these are all examples of EPR. This is specifically for consumer packaging. So this would basically mean that packaging is paid for in tonnage as it comes into our state by the producers of the material, so that they're incentivized to create more readily recyclable materials or more sustainable packaging, and reduce the amount of packaging that's coming in. So rethinking their packaging to be lighter weight, maybe using paper instead of some of the plastic alternatives, because those plastics would not be readily recyclable in our state. So the concept of this is to shift that burden of processing all of our materials and that packaging that's basically forced on consumers, right? Because we don't have a say in what things are coming in. But basically shift that burden away from taxpayers who are paying for recycling and waste services, and making sure that those companies are responsible for the packaging that they're producing. So that's an exciting shift in our state. Not only are they going to be fiscally responsible, it will bolster, that money will be used to support programs for recycling in our state and waste management and collection. So that's exciting. And hopefully we will just see less of this really bad plastic that's contributing to this microplastic problem and macroplastics, and just taking up a lot of space in our waste management system, because we only have so much lifetime within these landfills that we have in our state. And then, so that's the big thing on policy. And a way that you can help is to educate yourself on these sustainable waste management policies, educate yourself on ocean plastics and microplastics and the problems, make active decisions to not choose plastic and to find alternatives. Maybe you're even using resources like GoGo Refill in South Portland. That's a refill store, so you can refill things rather than going to the store and purchasing new materials. So these are all ways that we can continue to educate ourselves and perform better. And then advocating for policy that reduces plastic production and waste is a huge one. So making sure that we all know who our local stakeholders are, reaching out to representatives, supporting these policies, educating ourselves on where our trash ends up, seeing what's going on. We do tours of our facility, and it could even be as simple as picking up trash on the beach. I always say that, if you're at the beach and you see plastic, why are you just pointing it out and saying, oh, that's a shame, instead of picking it up? So picking up plastics when we are walking on the beach. Same with the sidewalk. If you see something that's a problem, pick it up and throw it away, because it's just one little thing, and it does some impact, So that's another small thing. And then following the waste hierarchy, so that reduce, reuse, recycle, compost digestion. These are those acknowledgements. It goes again. But definitely to the Sea Education Association and all of their students. They've had over 10,000 students go through the program, do these research studies. These are some of the programs that have sponsored those students and the research done. So, and just information, this is all social media for EcoMaine. We do all sorts of educational posts, things like that surrounding recycling, waste management, ocean plastics, ways that we can reduce waste in our state. We have a recyclopedia as well, where you can look things up and get proper disposal techniques for it, and my information as well. So with that said, I'm happy to take questions on ocean plastics, questions on recycling, even if it's just what material goes in what bin, things like that. I'm here to help you all. So, yes. Okay.
I live in Scarborough, and we used to be able to leave our recycling out.
Yeah.
And now can't. So we're bringing it to a facility. But I'm also interested in composting. I know my son lives in, Portland bordering Falmouth.
Yeah.
And he has a place that comes, and picks up his compost and his recycling. Do you know who would service Scarborough in that way?
Yeah, so Scarborough is interesting. They had a pilot program recently, actually, from Garbage to Garden, which Garbage to Garden is the company that would pick up those organics from Portland, Falmouth. I believe they're Cumberland, North Yarmouth. They're the greater Portland area. Scarborough did have a pilot program, but I guess there was problems with the pilot program, with the neighborhood that they chose. So there was problems getting it off the ground with the curbside program. So right now, I don't believe it's currently accessible. I would suggest continuing to reach out to Garbage to Garden and just express your interest in it, because the more interest they receive, the more they'll be likely to try it again. But they do have a drop-off location for organics that you can go to right now. So that might be the best for right now, and hopefully in the near future they will have that curbside available in the town of Scarborough.
And when you're composting and you go to those bins, all the compost goes in one bin, or do you have to divide it in any way?
All goes into one bin.
Okay.
As long as it's the materials that are acceptable at those locations, which I believe they take most. I believe Garbage to Garden's doing bones, grease, all the stinky stuff that you wouldn't want in the backyard necessarily, but they can all go to Garbage to Garden.
And somebody told me this while I have the floor.
Yeah.
Somebody told me that some of the developing countries, that some of the plastics are, landing there and they're reusing them. Do you know anything about that?
I don't think the amount of reuse going on within it is outweighs the amount of burden that having that material that's unusable in this place that no longer has a waste management, or that doesn't have a proper waste management structure. So maybe they're reusing some of it, but realistically, not all of it. I mean, if you get trash flowing into your country, where if it's, are you saying through the ocean or just being?
Through the ocean.
Yeah, through the ocean. Maybe some of it they're able to accept and repurpose, but most of it is not going to be good. It's just trash, and then there's nowhere to properly dispose of it. And now this is ending up, it's in the oceans, it's going to stay in the oceans. And
Yes.
I know I said this last time, but Kenya has had some American research people, and Kenya gets tons of trash, and they're making bricks
Oh,
out of the trash.
you mean like to build?
Mhm.
Oh, great.
Yes.
Do you know for EcoMaine what the percentage of the plastics you actually receive gets used into new material?
yeah, so any of the plastics that make it through our system, which we say about 10% of all of the material that is received at EcoMaine comes to us, and it is non-recyclable. That is contamination. So of the material that we receive, 90% of that is good recyclable material that goes to our sources. So from that, they're all purchased, so they all have value, and those bales are purchased by those companies to be repurposed into something new.
So
Well, that's pretty
recycling.
good because I keep hearing these things about the dismal rate of recycling
Yeah.
and that it's like.
Well, a big problem, and a lot of the times when you hear those recycling facts, it's of plastics created. So a lot of plastics aren't even made to be recycled to begin with. So of the plastics that we're introducing, the amount of recyclable plastics is absurdly low. I mean, you're thinking these are only plastic containers, but think of all the other plastic things within our planet. And a lot of the plastics are not even like 3 through 7 plastics. Those are really lower grade plastic materials. They're not that profitable for any company. Even for us, each bale is or ton is about $10 a ton, maybe. Maybe we're getting that much, $20 a ton. But think about all of that labor that's gone into sorting it at that point. For us, we're municipally owned nonprofit. That's what our community members want us to do. We're supported in that way. It's not profit driven, so it's not something that we just cut out because we do have a source that will accept those and recycle them into new materials. That's EFS Plastics. But a lot of recycling companies just cut that mixed plastic right out because they're not getting a return on it. So that's a huge concern with recycling as well, and where recycling is going. So, yeah. I have more on that too. There's actually even an entire story on our page. We did one. We had the CEO involved in it and stuff. So I can send that out to you I don't know if it's something you want to send as a follow-up, or you can reach out to this email, or my direct one is johnson@ecomaine.org, and I can send you all of that information as well. I have my cards up front too, if that's easier. So, yep. Mm-hmm.
You said a lot of the lobsterminutes, the buoys that are breaking up. Are they using any type of composition to help?
There's a lot of research going on right now, actually. I know the University of Maine is doing a lot of research as well on ways that we can have more of a bioplastic alternative to some of the fishing gear. The important thing is making sure that they are doing the same, holding up the same and doing the same job. But yeah, right now I believe there's a problem with the cost associated with the sustainable ones versus just getting foam, and it just being disparity there, where it's so much more expensive to have the ones that are better for the environment or that will break down more so. But there's a lot of research going on surrounding that. The Mitchell Center for Sustainable Solutions, I believe that's what the whole title is. They're doing a lot of work on bioplastic alternatives. There's even, they're trying to use byproducts or maybe it's algae. Dr. Cindy Eisenhower is doing some really cool research currently on making a alternative to plastic using marine products to begin with. So a lot of cool things happening in that space right now. Once again, I can send you more information on this if you're interested. Yes?
Yeah, so what happens to all the plastic packaging that you drop off like at Hannaford? you know, the stuff.
Yeah.
There's so much of it.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so what
All of
happens
the
to
plastic
that?
films and
Yeah,
stuff?
the plastic films and the
I don't know.
saran wrap and stuff like that.
We are told that goes to Trex. Hannaford's goes to Trex. So that's one thing that I'm almost positive, and you would have to reach out to the sustainability lead at Hannaford, but I've been told that Hannaford works directly with Trex, which is a program out of Pennsylvania. And that's turned into this. This is actually Trex right here. So we work with them with our HDP, or high density polyethylene. This right here, they also take low density polyethylene, same makeup, just the low density is that film plastic rather than we're using milk jugs, laundry detergent containers, stuff like that. But Hannaford's, I believe, goes to Trex when you do all that plastic packaging there. And then other places, I don't know for sure, you know, with Walmart, and I don't know if they're working with Trex because I believe Walmart has one, Target has one. I think film plastics are one of those things that we should be, you know, if there's not an easy way to dispose of them, like if we have to bring them to Hannaford and they can't, you know, they have a specific end market, I feel like those are all things that we should try to be avoiding. So instead of saying, I know we can't avoid it fully, obviously there's things that we get that need to go there, and that's great that we have that resource, but I think sometimes people just put it all together, and it's almost justification for buying the plastic is that there's an end source. So there is a very interesting news article. It was I think ABC News that they did. They put geotags in those film plastic collection sites and tracked them and where they went. So this is online. Very interesting. They found a lot of them did not go to, they went abroad and then ended up in, interesting. They like go to the facility. I suggest just watching it. I don't want to, because I don't want to. I think it's great that we can recycle film plastics in some capacity, especially Maine. But that being said, I'm skeptical of some of them, I will say. So research is always fast on those things. Yes?
I'm not familiar with that. I shop in Scarborough, Hannaford. What is the film plastics and where is
Yeah,
it?
so they have a couple of bins, like in Yarmouth at the Hannaford. If you walk in,
Okay.
near where the carts are, there are a
Okay.
couple of bins that says plastic recycling. And all the film stuff, you know, the plastic coverings that
Yes.
food is packaged in, you can just deposit it in there. But I was always wondering, where does that end up? Where does that go?
Rather than
So-
put it in the recycling.
I suggest you watch, it's like 15 minutes, I think, or 20 minutes, and it's that news special. It's just, I think you can look up like film plastic collection. I think it's ABC News, and it's very interesting.
That's the kind of bag you might put your apples in.
Yeah, like the apples in the grocery store, things like that. So those kind of film plastics like that, that's why Hannaford does collections for them, because they have them right in their produce section, these film plastic bags. So that gives them a way that they can recycle them.
Essentially, it's any plastic that can be stretched,
Yep.
right? Like you can stick it on.
Yeah, so even I've been told that even like when you buy frozen vegetables, those bags, same LDP, low density polyethylene, film plastics. Poland Spring water bottles are wrapped in a coating, a plastic coating. These are all the number one contaminant of recycling. Those are not curbside recyclable, I will say. So those are what we have problems with when they come to EcoMaine. And that makes up a large portion of that 10% of contamination we were talking about is film plastics that come to us that they were never recyclable, curbside recyclable to begin with, but people put them in left and right. So we do have those a lot. And they'll get jammed up in our machines. They can cause fires. They can break our machinery. They're really problematic for us. Yeah. Yeah.
In North Yarmouth, we recently got the rolling carts with the covers, for trash, one for trash, one for recycling. That's been a huge help because think of how much wind we've had this week. And
Oh, yeah.
what I used to see is with open containers, the stuff just flew all over the place. So I'm wondering how many communities that you serve have those? Is it something you're gradually working towards?
Yeah, so Casella is the one that hauls for you all, I believe, and they're the ones switching over to those bins. That's a huge benefit of them, is that they, people aren't jam packing these things. For a while they were having trash like overflowing. People weren't putting everything into a bin. It's problematic. Now a big reason behind them is that they're able to do curbside collection without somebody, 2 people. They have a machine, a big claw that will pick them up now and drop them into the back. They can have one person doing the entire job. So with staffing shortages, this has been a game changer for them to be able to continue and stick to those routes and not miss trash days, things like that. So that was the big, my understanding, that's the big thing about switching them over is how much more functional they were for the company. The towns that work with Casella are switching over to those almost. They're slowly integrating them. I would say, I don't actually know how many, but I know for sure that most of Greater Portland, so Falmouth has them. North Yarmouth, you have it. Cumberland doesn't yet, right? Not yet. They'll be coming. I was going to say they will be coming. I guarantee.
Summer, yeah.
It's summer is when they're getting them. Yeah. I believe, does Scarborough have them? The big bins yet?
I don't know.
Old Orchard Beach, I think, just got them. I know they did because they put our phone number on it, even though, and we were getting all the calls about it, even though we didn't have any of the answers. So we had to divert those to Public Works. But yeah, so there's definitely towns slowly switching. I think maybe Wyndham. It's not as many as you would think have switched over to those bins right now, but that's definitely an advantage because now people aren't overflowing, ideally, are overflowing them, or else they won't, they're not going to pick up the excess. If it's not in the bin, it's not going to get picked up. But yeah, you think, we were just talking about even down at the Portland East End by the food trucks, like I don't know if anyone goes over there at all, but they have a bunch of food trucks down on the Eastern Prom right now. And because they're not set up for waste, these trash cans there just get overflown with all of this food truck trash. And even if those companies are using those bioplastics, compostables, there's no place to compost them, so it's going into the trash and all this stuff can fly out. And yeah, there's not much for capacity for picking up the trash, and Public Works departments, I believe, are all understaffed. A lot of them are the guys picking up the trash or the guys plowing your roads in a snowstorm. So that's another problem. Yeah.
Who funds EcoMaine, and do you get any federal funding, or?
You all are actually owners in EcoMaine. So we are community owned. We are owned by 20 communities. You said you were Scarborough. That was one of our founding communities. It was Scarborough, South Portland, Cape Elizabeth, and Portland. Those are our 4 original communities that we started with back in the 70s. And then in the 80s, they built our waste-to-energy facility and then began recycling in the 90s. When they started the waste-to-energy facility, that's when we took on it was 16 more communities. So we had 20 communities that we were partnered with. That's when North Yarmouth became an owner community. Cumberland, you all have a member from your community who is sits on a board of directors for EcoMaine. And when we pay our taxes, that tax money is then used, part of it is used for your waste services. So that would be as part owners in EcoMaine. And then, so you all have some ability to reach out to those board members and become involved in this too if you're interested, and let them know decisions or things you'd like to see. So, yeah.
So it's nonprofit funded by.
It's a quasi-municipal 501c3 nonprofit. So it's kind of a funky setup that we have, but we're municipally owned. The funding is not grant funding, it's municipal funding. Yep.
So the question that I've never really thought about until right now here, we talked about the film plastics. What happens, so our garbage bags are technically basically those kinds of stretchy plastics, right?
Yeah.
So what happens to the garbage bags when you get?
Well, hopefully we don't have them in recycling. Garbage bags
So
should,
they
yeah.
would be in trash, right? So they just.
The green's okay, the
bags,
film
yeah.
plastics, the bags will go to the waste to energy facility. And that's not a problem when it goes through our waste to energy facility, it's only a problem with recycling.
I see.
So
So it
don't
just
bag your
ends up-
recyclables.
So it
that's
just
the big
ends
thing.
up in trash. It doesn't end up, there's no way to
Separate it.
to separate it
Yeah.
and recycle.
Once
Okay.
materials are thrown in your trash bin, they're treated as trash. They're not gonna go past any
Yeah.
sorting or any kind of separation.
So does that result, that process that you're doing with the trash, is that resulting in microplastics ending up, I mean,
It would all be contained in the landfill. So those aren't gonna escape, the microplastics aren't gonna escape through the atmosphere because
Okay, I
we
didn't
have
know
an
if that
electrostatic
process of
associator.
incinerating or whatever.
No, so we take particulate matter out.
Okay.
So that's using ESPs, they'll attract particulate matter, and then those drop down into a bottom ash. That bottom, or the fly ash that's combined with bottom ash, and that ash is then brought to our ash fill. So by reducing the amount of volume, the trash is going to take up by 1/10 of its original volume, which is great, but it's still trash. You know, like we still are going to have to stick it in a landfill somewhere, because even if it's an ash material, it's not just an innate ash. It's needs to be contained. So it's contained in liners, same as any other landfill. It is very dense at that point, so it doesn't blow away into the environment, which is also a good thing. We don't have like loose plastics flying around. People actually walk at our landfill. Kind of interesting. I always think that's so odd, but like there's people like walking the trails. Anyway, I don't think they're really supposed to, and I don't know why you would want to, but it does happen, yes.
I just had a similar question. So the green bags that we're forced to pay for in Cumberland, and I understand why and
Yeah.
all that, but are they made from recycled materials? Because most of us are putting white trash bags in green trash bags, and yeah.
I don't know. I don't know where they're purchasing the bags from and if all towns are purchasing from the same location. That'd be a great question to ask your public works, because I believe they're the ones probably or even your town offices, they're going to be responsible for whoever's purchasing the bags. Because, yeah, great to know, because a lot of people, I know I do, I double bag my I have my kitchen bag, and then that goes in a bigger bag in my garage, and then that goes to for pickup. So, yeah. So I don't know if they're made of recycled material, but that's a suggestion that you can make to your town for sure, is to begin sourcing those from a more sustainable company that's creating them out of recycled materials rather than virgin plastics. Yes.
Go ahead.
Oh, if plastic comes from petroleum, why doesn't it break down completely?
Because there's it's a breakup or a makeup. So it doesn't, even though it comes from petroleum, they're all different molecules, and the molecules don't break down. Even when it's combusted, it doesn't fully break down. So that gets into the chemical makeup, and there's thousands. I don't want to actually say, it's more than thousands of different polymers of plastics. But yeah, they won't break down into those individual molecules.
Yeah, my question is that in the past we were able to recycle books that we couldn't reuse or give to others here at the library, and now we're no longer able to do that. They go into the trash. And,
Okay.
and I didn't understand why that would be.
Okay, so recycling books that
Or just can't be.
can't be read or
No.
used anymore.
Yeah.
They should be okay to put in the.
Yeah, I think the issue is the volume with which sometimes that happens, and it's the time that it takes, because we would have to take the covers off
Yeah.
the books and the staffing to do that. I mean, I don't want to give the impression that we're throwing out a ton of books, FYI, but sometimes we get
Well,
donations that are mildewy or moldy or
Yeah.
water damaged, and
right.
Yeah.
so if we get, a lot, then it becomes a difficult process for us. staffing
So it's
wise.
more that than
Yeah, because my understanding is
We can take
that
paperback
if
books.
you- So you can take paperback? Right.
And we
So-
can take hardcovers if the hardcover's pulled off.
If
As
the-
you,
oh, if
which
the
is,
so not just the plastic covering, but the actual hard cover.
yeah, the hardcover.
The
would have to be
hardcover
pulled
off the book.
which is kind of a challenge, honestly,
Yeah.
and that's why it's not necessarily convenient, especially if you have a large amount of books that you're going through. But the paperback one should be okay.
Thank you.
Yes.
Sometimes a lot of times for our books, if there are books that are not circulating and have been damaged to the point of not being able to be used, we do cover our books in plastic to help, to help with the durability of them. So it could be that plastic is kind of a sticky plastic that we put on, so even that, we'd have to probably pull the cover
Be
off.
interesting to see if you can find
Yeah, yeah.
post-consumer recycled
Mhm.
versions of that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's something that's certainly on our mind.
Yeah.
It's
Probably a pretty
it's
niche.
a staffing and funding, it's staffing and funding issue.
Yeah,
That's-
definitely.
That's the issue, yeah.
And that's what it comes down to with a lot of those things is, it's often a lot more expensive to choose the more environmentally friendly option, which is, it's a shame, but it's the way things are right now. So, yeah.
I've started using the dryer sheets rather than a jug of laundry detergent.
Yeah.
Not dryer sheets, but washing.
Yeah.
Detergent. That seems to be working. My credit card that just came is recycled plastic, so
Mhm.
that was interesting to see.
Yeah.
Are you seeing a change? This law in packaging is pretty new, but any reduction in volume, then that has to be offset by how many people are recycling. I know I see the
Yeah.
statistics for each town, percentages, and how they want that to increase. And the incentive is when you have to buy a bag, that costs
Yeah.
money. So why not recycle? But I think some communities do better than others.
Definitely. And we do see oftentimes that the higher recycling numbers come from the communities with pay-as-you-throw bags. So when you have to pay for your trash, people want to put as much as they can into the recycling. So they're more apt to recycle properly and recycle in general. So that's true. The EPR policy has not gone into place yet, so any of the effects you're seeing are not going to be directly from the EPR. It's still in its rulemaking. Well, rulemaking has done, but it's still in. They're creating a readily recyclable list. I believe 2027 is when we'll start to see that kind of. 26, 27 is when that's going to be more. The effects will be seen. I think a lot of what we're seeing is companies having their own sustainability goals now. So that's where a lot of shifts, like your credit card, I'm sure that their company actually is making these changes internally to stay up with their own environmental standards, which is very neat. A lot going on in the corporate sector of things as well, with companies now strategically trying to be better for the environment in general. Sorry if I missed any part of your question. What was the other?
It's coming down the road. It's not in effect yet.
Yeah.
I'd forgotten that, but you're right.
Yeah.
I was going to go to the grocery store today, and I think about the things I always buy. Like, I love the backyard tomatoes. Those are in a little cardboard box. That's great.
Mm-hmm.
But then the little leaf lettuce is the plastic, although I do reuse them.
Yeah. And the little leaf, those ones can go, they can be recycled. So that is a recyclable plastic, more so than, but the best, rather than a plastic film bag, some of the romaine lettuce, I believe, comes in like plastic bags. So the rigid plastic containers are often a better choice than film plastics, if you can make that choice. So that's one important thing to know. So, and then beyond that, choosing a plastic-free alternative is going to be the best. And that goes for the plastic bags too. I know it's sometimes easy to have everything in one little bag. You put all your cucumbers in one bag or whatever it is. But that being said, they don't always need it. If you're washing them at home, wash them and not put them into those bags, and it's okay. So
Carry your own little bags.
yeah, or bring your own
Napkins and
reusable
so
ones.
forth.
Exactly,
Yes.
that's a great alternative as well if you like to do that.
The other thing I like is raspberries, but I've never seen them in anything but plastic.
Yep, the raspberries, those ones are recyclable at EcoMaine. Those are PET, so those get sorted out. PET is actually quite a 1s and 2 plastics, which a lot of those packaging are starting to shift towards. Those are highly recyclable. Those ones are more higher value than the 3 through 7s are generally the ones you should try to avoid. So, any other questions? Also, if people need to leave, that's okay. It's been a long time, but all right. Great, thank you. And if you have any other questions, yeah, thank you. Any other questions, feel free to reach out. I've got my cards up front, so if you are interested in those. Otherwise, thank you all for coming. Have a nice Saturday. Happy weekend.